Hello, everybody. My name is Kelty Garby, and I'm the Executive Director of Texas Rural Funders. I wanted to just start and tell you all a little bit about Texas Rural Funders and then about our program before we hand it over to my colleague and our guest. Texas Rural Funders is a statewide membership organization for funders. So we are focused on bringing attention and resources to rural communities. So we are not a funder, but work very closely with our funder members to highlight the good work that's happening in rural communities and provide attention and resources. And so today we're convening a program focused on rural libraries called Hot Off the Shelf, Libraries for Health Evaluation and Replication Toolkit from RAND. So the idea here is that in 2022, St. David's Foundation launched Libraries for Health. And this is a pilot designed to reimagine mental health delivery by embedding peer support services directly into 10 rural libraries. These trusted, accessible community hubs became vital spaces for mental wellness, thanks to the collaborative efforts of implementation partner Via Hope and the evaluation partner RAND, and the hard work of libraries. So today we have with us some of those libraries as well as RAND and St. David's, and they're going to talk about their newly released evaluation report, the Replication Toolkit, and attendees today will learn more about how the program model works, what made it successful and challenging, and how your rural community can adapt this model to meet your local resource needs. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Evan Wollstonecroft, to kick us off.
Thanks, Kelty. Hi, y'all. My name is Evan Wollstonecroft. I'm the program manager for Texas Rural Funders. Here to give us a little bit of an overview for how we'll spend the next hour. As Kelty mentioned, this is a showcase of the evaluation report and replication toolkit for Libraries for Health. What we've been seeing on screen as Kelty's been giving us this intro has been a photo essay of what Libraries for Health has been like in the communities where it's been running. So we're going to kick off with a little bit of where Libraries for Health came from, the idea for this pilot, and the cohort that's since emerged from it, with Abena Asante, Senior Program Officer for St. David's Foundation, followed quickly by a presentation on the evaluation report and toolkit for replication from Lindsay Eyre, Senior Behavioral Scientist with RAND. After that, we're going to have a brief discussion panel with library directors who have been part of the Libraries for Health cohort, and one library director has taken elements of Libraries for Health and brought it to her rural library in West Texas. So excited to have later in the hour, Melinda Hodges, Director of Beta Library, Susan Gregorick, Library Director for Gerald Community Library and Resource Center, and Andrea Dre McAdams, the Director of City of Sundown Library. As we reach the end of the hour, we hope to have time for audience question and answer. Although please know that the slides will go out. Y'all get a copy of the photo essay that we've been seeing on screen, as well as a copy of the recording and any other materials that we reference on today's call. So I'm going to quickly stop sharing my screen and replace this with our presentation slides. And now I'd like to kick it over to Abena Asante to get us started on the origin stories of Libraries for Health.
Thank you, Evan. Good morning, everyone, and happy Tuesday. My name is Abena Asante, Senior Program Officer with St. David's Foundation, and I'd like to thank you all for joining today's discussion, and one which I am deeply passionate about and excited to share more, and know that this is not the only chance that you can learn about Libraries for Health. So before we dig into our work on how libraries may serve as a new model for rural mental health, I wanted to share a little bit of the background of St. David's Foundation, who we are, etc. So we are based in Austin, Texas, and we are one of the largest health foundations in the US, funding nearly 19 million in the 5-county area of Bastrop, Caldwell, Hayes, Williamson, and Travis County. And through a unique partnership with St. David's Healthcare, we are able to reinvest these proceeds from the hospital system back into the community with a goal of advancing health equity and improving the health and well-being of our most underserved Central Texas neighbors. Beyond grant making, we also operate the largest mobile dental program, providing charity care in the country. And we also run the largest healthcare scholarship programs in Texas. So if you're not from Texas, here in Texas, everything is big. So I'd like to move on and talk about our strategic plan, Pathways to Health Equity. So in early 2024, the foundation introduced a new strategic plan, Pathways to Health Equity, that reflects the foundation's evolving work on health over 3 decades of work. So given our growth as a foundation, we are now able to address immediate health needs as well as invest in improved health tomorrow for generations to come. We can't do it alone. We do it in partnership with our community. And we are a learning foundation. So you can see from the slides from Pathways to Health Equity, quick overview on our 3 goal areas. Our first goal area is increasing access to quality care to advance health equity. Second goal area is around removing economic barriers to improve health outcomes. And then the third one that I'm super passionate about is equipping communities to achieve their health priorities. So this third goal is particularly relevant to the Libraries for Health initiative that we are going to showcase today alongside our partners RAND and also the libraries that are involved in this initiative. So why libraries? That was a huge question that came up. And before we got onto this journey, the foundation had several conversations. We engaged the former executive director of the Institute of Museum and Library Service to do interviews, not only with the libraries here in Texas, but also across the nation with other sectors, Texas Library Association, Tucker Foundation, so many groups to help inform the design of the initiative. In our work as a foundation and also in working with partners to do the community health needs assessment, mental health came up again and again as an issue, not only in our urban, rural, and suburban areas, but it was spotlighted more in our rural communities around depression, anxiety, and other types of mental health conditions. You all know the stats around suicide rates in rural communities, which is much higher compared to other areas. And from me working in rural and also what others have said about rural believes in homegrown activities, homegrown leading change themselves. I always say that there's talent in rural, but sadly not the philanthropic and other public support, and sometimes not the not philanthropic funding support, and sometimes not those opportunities that can help advance some of those thoughts and ideas from our rural partners. So this initiative, Rural Libraries for Health, addresses the persistent shortage of mental health providers. We know that Libraries for Health is not taking the place of clinical care. It's just one way of addressing some of the stresses and issues that residents face when dealing with life. So with this initiative, we are looking at public libraries that we interviewed. They told us that they are being confronted with mental health issues from their patrons. They really want to address it. They are not equipped to address it. And they want to partner to co-create an initiative with us. They were really clear that they don't have the capacity to supervise staff. They don't have the money to do the programming. So we took that all into considerations during the interviews. Public libraries, as we know, are third spaces. They are these community spaces that people feel comfortable at. Um, and we know that sometimes adult patrons, sometimes with mental health issues or not feeling at their best, go to the library because of this trusted space that it provides. Our libraries recognize these challenges and they proactively link their services to mental health prevention, and they use their programs to help reduce anxiety and depression early on. A few of the libraries that we had interviewed offer social work support, but these are mainly for those facing homelessness or abuse. Libraries for Health is more like a prevention, early intervention before the crisis. And it's also building the capacity of our local libraries to be able to use tools and resources to address some of those issues. I'm going to pass it over to Lindsay, who is going to talk about the core components of Libraries for Health, our evaluation findings over the 3.5 year pilot, and also to hear directly from our library directors on their accomplishments and challenges about this initiative. And then we'll get into Q&A and answer all the questions that you have. So Lindsay?
Thanks, Abena. Happy to be here with all of you. So this slide shows you the core components of the Libraries for Health model. At the top, you'll see flexible funds, which are grants that St. David's provided to each of the libraries. We had 10 libraries in this pilot project. The grants were proportional to the population size in the library community, and that was varied. We had some very small libraries and communities and some larger ones. And then down on the left in the gray circle is a group learning component. We called it the library cohort, where we met quarterly. All the libraries met together, as well as sometimes the peer specialists joined those calls and would talk through different challenges they might be having, successes, and out of that came a lot, which I will share. I'll share more about that in a little bit. The peer specialists were key to all of this as well. We ended up having 7 certified peer specialists assigned to libraries by the time things got really up and running. Some of those peer specialists worked in multiple libraries, so that's why there are fewer peer specialists than libraries. The peer specialists were trained and certified by an organization called Via Hope, which has licensure in the state of Texas to do the training and certification. And then the peer specialists had to fulfill certain requirements, like getting a certain number of supervised hours, and then they continued to be supervised throughout the project, either in group or individual settings. The peer specialists their salaries were covered by St. David's separately from those flexible funds grants to the libraries. Next slide. So today I'm going to give you a little snapshot of our evaluation findings It won't be everything, but you can find our research report that gives a more thorough summary of all of our findings. We can share the link to that separately, and then I'll go through the toolkit. So our three main research questions for the evaluation are shown here with a sort of fourth extra question. But first, we wanted to really describe how this innovative program was implemented over the course of the project and how that evolved over time, including each of the different components I just covered. We also wanted to identify what the key ingredients were for successful implementation, so facilitators, as well as the barriers. What were the common challenges that we faced, and how did we overcome them or not? And then finally, we looked at what structures, policies, and practices libraries put in place to help them build and sustain capacity overall, beyond just the peer specialists, but library-wide and even sometimes community-wide to meet the needs of the mental health needs of their communities. And then here at the bottom, you see we didn't have a comparison group or randomized controlled trial, so we couldn't do, the traditional so-called gold standard type of research design. But we did ask staff and patrons periodically about how things were going, and looking back, what they felt was helpful about the program. So we'll share a little bit about what they said. Next slide. We collected and analyzed data from a lot of different sources, as shown here. You could see some of the data sources were collected every year, others only at certain time points. I'm not going to go into detail about all of this, but if you are a researchy person curious about methods, I'd be happy to share more later. Next slide. So here we're going to get into our findings from the evaluation. And first is that question about how implementation evolved over time. So we had peer specialists supporting patrons on an individual basis, one-on-one, but also at most libraries, the peer specialists also led new programming tied to mental health. So examples are anxiety and depression support groups, a mental health book club, a Wellness Wednesday craft, a grief support group, parenting support. It really depended on what was needed in order to respond to the needs of the community. Staff at most libraries also talked about how the peer specialists helped them have conversations about their own struggles, reminding staff to practice self-care, as well as providing feedback about their interactions with patrons. So a lot of staff talked about how the peer specialist was a big help in navigating some difficult situations with patrons relating to mental health. And then a lot of the libraries had a peer specialist who worked outside the library as well to identify community resources and establish connections and find ways to work towards a shared mission with other community organizations. And then at about half the libraries, the peer specialist also supported staff with general library tasks, like at the circulation desk, which may seem out of scope, but these types of interactions really helped the peer specialist to integrate into the library, get to know the patrons and staff, and feel part of the library culture. Next slide, please. So we're going to turn to what happened with that library cohort I talked about earlier. The cohort, again, met quarterly, but what we found was that often little ad hoc groups would break out. So sometimes some of the smaller libraries might get together separately to talk through issues that are really unique to having a smaller setting, or libraries that were dealing with similar types of issues might be able to pick up the phone and call each other, as this quote says. to talk through issues. So the cohort was a formal way of meeting, but it fostered these other additional conversations. Next slide. So this shows the different purposes of the grant funding that libraries found most useful throughout the course of the project. So there was programmatic support that the grant funding provided. So for labor or materials, for community events, providing workshops, seminars, classes, things like that, as well as library infrastructure like purchasing additional books or technology to support the mental health collections at the library. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, community engagement ended up being a really big piece of L4H. So the outreach to other community organizations and community members, letting them know that L4H was in the library, things like translation of resources for Spanish-speaking communities. The grant funding helped with all of that as well. Next slide. So again, this is about facilitators and barriers, our second research question. And so we found that it was really helpful to engage these external partners. It really allowed libraries to expand their programming. So examples are bringing in yoga classes or sound healing or end-of-life conversations, things that maybe other organizations in the community already do and are really good at, but could be done in the library to increase access. Some library directors also engage their staff in L4H planning and oversight, and that we found really helped with implementation, so everyone was on the same page. Supportive staff also helped the peer specialists to feel welcome and confident in their new position. It really eased the integration of the peer specialist into the library. Remember, this is a new innovation. Peer specialists are not normally in libraries. They're normally more in healthcare settings or mental health care settings. So this was something that took adjustment. And integrating the peer specialists into existing or new programming already happening at the library also was helpful for that purpose, to familiarize patrons and staff with the peer specialists and with just the whole idea of peer support and what it is. Next slide. So once they started L4H programming, almost all the libraries initially struggled to raise community awareness of the programming. So there was, at the beginning, it was slow to get participation up to where we wanted it to be. Some adaptations that it helped address this barrier were small, like maybe providing an online option for signups for appointments with a peer specialist or for a group, or embedding the peer specialist into existing programs, as I mentioned before, helped ease comfort with the peer specialist. Access to L4H programming was also a challenge for some patrons because of logistics like transportation or English proficiency or just time. So several libraries ended up making adjustments to their schedules, allowing for outside the library interactions where peer specialists could meet with patrons outside the library. They thought creatively about how to advertise the program and find ways to overcome some of these logistical barriers. A couple libraries even expanded their operating hours to include evenings and weekends so that they could host L4H programming during that time. And then a major barrier we found was recruitment and retention of peer specialists. And the most successful way we ultimately identified to do that was to encourage existing library volunteers or other highly engaged community members to apply. And I know Susan and Melinda later on may have something to say about that. Next slide. So flexibility in how libraries could design and implement L4H was part of the project, but it ended up leaving a lot of libraries uncertain about how to implement L4H. So that was a challenge we addressed, we worked through together, but it definitely was a source of stress, I think, for a lot of the libraries. And staff from some libraries also found it hard to learn from the library cohort because of differences with their library size or location. So some libraries were relatively new or only had a couple of staff, whereas others were very long established in their communities and had dozens of staff members. So as you could imagine, that, you're working with completely different infrastructure. Some library staff were also a little bit resistant to larger scale implementation, and that made it hard to fully implement L4H. Some of them were hesitant to support the peer specialist in working with patrons. And in a few cases, the peer specialist's experience or skill set just really didn't align well with the needs of the community. And so there was some mixing and matching that happened early on. Next slide. So regarding sustainability and capacity building, most staff really wanted to sustain L4H programming, including the peer specialists. But as usual with any new program, lack of funding and finding the money to support those efforts is a key barrier. And these concerns existed from the outset and only grew over time. We have a couple of quotes here, and this is a photo from one of our convenings last year. But on the left, you can see a library director said, "I don't want to give up the peer specialists. I haven't had to realize that in my budget at all, as an aside from me, because St. David's paid for that person. So they've become a valuable part of our library. How can we keep them here?" So after the grant ends, these libraries would have to take on the cost somehow of the peer specialist. And then on the right-hand side, you can see this library director is trying to find grants to help with sustainability, but feeling in panic mode, trying to keep all these people working here. Next slide. In terms of how staff felt about the Libraries for Health project, they at almost all libraries described a real shift in their mindset, becoming more empathic, open-minded, and sensitive to patrons' needs. They also said they had more confidence about their ability to engage with patrons experiencing mental health problems, and that Libraries for Health had helped them to develop stronger relationships with their peers, with other staff. And that it was helpful for handling their own mental health challenges. Next slide. And also, staff said that they felt L4H had helped increase patron engagement, both increasing attendance at the library and attracting new groups of patrons, which is great to see. And when we talked to staff and patrons at libraries, we found that we heard that most patrons, especially seniors, had built social connections through L4H that they hadn't necessarily had before. Next slide. So as a result of participating in L4H or receiving support from a peer specialist, interviewees in our study said that patrons seem to be doing and feeling better after engaging in those conversations. So just for the sake of time, I'm gonna go to the next slide, Evan. So I'll tell you, just give you some snapshots on the toolkit. Again, this is something that you can download for free online. So next slide. RAND worked with Via Hope and St. David's to develop this toolkit using information from the evaluation as well as input from the libraries. We had a whole workshop about the toolkit at one of our convenings, and that went into this as well. It is intended to provide guidance, including worksheets and tools for other libraries who might be interested in adapting L4H for their own setting. We're thinking usually it's going to be the library director who uses this. So this is just a table of contents you can see and some of the materials that are in the toolkit. But again, we encourage you to look online and we'll be happy to answer questions. That's it.
Thanks, Lindsay. Folks, we are going to quickly transition to our discussion panel and bring our library directors up on screen. While we do that, feel free to drop any questions you have so far in the chat while we get everyone set up. All right, ready to go. So, folks, we have with us a discussion panel of library directors, two libraries that were part of the Libraries for Health cohort, one in West Texas that has embedded peer support into their city library independent of the cohort. But what we just heard from Abena and then from Lindsay really looked at some of the high-level findings of this pilot over the last 3.5 years. And looking across the entire 10 library cohort, what helped make that successful? Embedding peer support within the library, multi-year funding, flexible funding, and how it helped change not just the mindset of some of the library staff that participated, but also how it helped drive patron engagement. What we'd like to do now is sort of drill down to the level of an individual library. What did this look like on the ground for the folks who help integrate these peer support specialists and these peer resources into their library? But to kick us off, I'd love for our library directors to give us a snapshot of their library and their community. We are joined by Melinda Hodges, Director of Beta Library, Susan Gregorick, Director of Gerald Community Library and Resource Center, and Dre McAdams, Director of City of Sundown Library. So start us off, Melinda, we'll popcorn around. We're going to start with you. Tell us a little bit about your library, your community, how many staff you have, how's your library set up?
Sure. We are a municipal library, so we are a department of the city of Buda. We have 10 full-time staff members, and we serve about 40,000 people, depending on how you want to count. And we're in a shared building with our city hall, but library space is about 25,000 square feet. However, we did move from a building that was a little over 5,000 square feet, so we know the challenges of both sides of that.
Of course. Susan, over in Gerald, tell us a little bit about your library and your community and how you're set up.
Good morning. We're a nonprofit library that was started we opened in 2019 and I was brought on in 2021. Our library is located in Gerald, Texas, which is one of the fastest growing communities in the state of Texas. It's actually grown from 7,000 people to 26,000 since I began. And at one point in time, we had the whole 3,000 square foot building here. But as the master plan community of Sonterra grew, they started their Parks and Rec. And so we are down to 1,600 square feet with approximately 2,700 patrons belonging to our library, but 26,000 in the community. And growing every day. We're growing at 128 homes per month. Fortunately, we were just gifted 2 acres of land so that we might be able to start a new library soon.
And you're a staff of 2?
We're a staff of 2 paid by the library, 1 paid by our AARP, and we're lucky enough to have 2 peer support specialists. So we all work as one team.
Excellent. And then Dre, zooming way out to West Texas, tell us about Sundown Library.
Yes, so we are also a municipality department, and we are rural, so 1,400 people population in our town. It is a very high performing 2A school. We are the current band champions, state champions, and softball state champions. So we do have some commuters from a nearby county. We were once a county branch library, but now we are a city entity. Our current building actually is 4,200 square feet. We moved from a little over 1,000 square feet just in 2024. So complete renovation here. One of the spaces I'll talk about is a gamer lounge. It's 370 square feet. But there is a staff of, I'm full-time, and then I have a part-time, about 20 hours a week. She's paid from a grant, and then a 12-hour per week that is paid from the city.
Excellent, thank you. So to kick us off with some of our questions, I'd really love to start off with Buda Library, Gerald Community Library, to sort of better understand what brought your libraries into the L4H cohort. Can you tell us a little bit about why your library participated in this pilot? Melinda, can we start with you?
Sure. So I just personally had interest in various medical things, and that kind of shifted into wondering how public libraries could be community health partners. And especially once we started to see the implications of the isolation during the pandemic and the need for connections, that's when I really started to want to put the library out there to see what we could do with that.
And you'd actually written a paper on how to put community resources in a library, correct?
I did. I was finishing up my certified public manager certification, and that was my research paper for that project.
Excellent. Susan, over in Gerald, what brought you all into Libraries for Health?
So the library had just begun, and the library was looking for ways, since they were a nonprofit, they were looking for ways to fund the library. We were made up of 20,000 donated books, and so they were looking to gain resources and help in this growing community and help those. So it was kind of a two-way street of the board members trying to find a way to help fund the needed resources in the library and provide for the growing population. The Communities for Health, the Libraries for Health initiative actually started with me. They had already applied for the grant, and so it truly was the foundation and became the fabric of our library as we started off together, as me being the only employee to begin with. And so it's become a beautiful relationship between the library and all of our mental health and wellness resources to a very new community.
And through the course of your participation in Libraries for Health, the library actually changed its name, right?
Oh, we actually did. So the library started as a community library of Northern Williamson County. And once our volunteer became our peer support specialist, we quickly recognized that we were facilitating all of the health, human, business, education, and social services in the community that was lacking. And so our board recognized this and changed our library to Gerald Community Library and Resource Center to bring attention that we were the location for all of the social services that were lacking in the community and still are lacking today.
So thinking about that, I mean, just how this has sort of shaped the identity of your library as a community resource center. Melinda and Susan, I actually want to look at a question that we just got in the chat from Robert Dole, because I think this gets into the heart of how the program was implemented at your libraries. Can you talk a little bit about how the peer support specialists were supervised. Specifically, how would a librarian implement peer support without taking on duties they may not feel adequately trained to perform? Melinda, we'll start with you.
So the way that the peers were supervised was through Via Hope. So the organization that recruited them, trained them, also supervised them. And that was something we had to kind of come to terms with, is that I am not their boss. I am not going to tell them what to do. We're a partnership. And that does take trust on both sides, that they are serving the patrons to our standards, only with their specific skill set.
Susan?
And for Gerald Library, it we have become one force. Yes, we worked with the peer support specialist worked with Via Hope, but this was a pilot, so we were working our way through and finding our way as a very small community of um, originally 2 part-time employees and volunteers. Um, so we worked as a team, we supported each other as a team. And the comment that you saw earlier in Lindsay's slides said that working in the library was transformational. And that was from me, because when Mary would sit at the front desk, if a volunteer wasn't there, if Mary sat at the front desk, she met new people, she visited with them, she saw who may be coming in with troubles or needs, and they recognized her. So whenever there was a need, it was natural for them to come in and find the time and space to visit with Mary. And this is continued with us bringing in all 3 of our peer support specialists have been volunteers with the library, joining us with story time, starting with story time or whatever, and then becoming a peer support specialist where they are thriving as a member of our library and not just someone that sits over at a desk that they are paid by someone else. They have someone else as a boss, but we have focused on making it a team effort and not who's your boss in our library.
Sure. Thank you. So I think piggybacking off of this conversation around how the peers are supervised, looking at our external implementation partner with Via Hope to help supervise specifically the mental health resource aspects of the job, but also looking at how y'all integrated them into your staff. I think that we heard from Lindsay that was a key part of the success of the approach that they saw through the evaluation across the cohort. But from your perspectives as the library directors, what factors made L4H succeed in your specific library, including like some lessons learned? What were challenges that you had to work through over the past 3.5 years of bringing this to your community? Melinda?
Sure. So the thing that I think made this project the most successful for us was the ability to just try anything. We were able to do the normal library thing, so got more books, DVDs, print resources, digital resources. We used some of our funding on getting an updated calendaring system, sign-up system, so it's easier for people to know what's actually available and sign up for it. We also focused on offering just a variety of classes. So art classes, lecture series, time where people could come into our makerspace and we called it calm crafting. We called Self-Care Saturday series. So just a different type of self-care every couple of weeks on a Saturday. There was the sound baths, the yoga, all that good stuff. Had some large one-day events. So we had an adult hobby fair that brought out just hundreds of people. That was amazing. Had a self-care fair and classes. And then our peer support specialists were available both for the one-on-one meetings with people that needed some more help right then, and also facilitated the peer support groups. Lessons learned is to just, give it a try. And if it doesn't work for your community, change it. You don't have to be married to a certain way of doing things. You, just like everything else in the library, you listen to people, you watch how they're interacting and using the resources, and then you change. I think the big challenge that we had with Libraries for Health overall was that people just don't think of a public library as somewhere where you would get these mental wellness tools. And some people think we shouldn't be offering these mental wellness tools and resources. But it all comes back to we are the place where people go to get information to be able to live their best lives. So this is just continuing with that.
Course. Susan, I know that you had shared previously that one of the lessons learned for you was sort of leaning on the power of the cohort. Can you talk a little bit more about just the peers that you had among other library directors and sort of seeing this pilot through in Gerald?
So with all of the directors and the group leaders, we get to meet with our cohort, Takesha being our leader and providing wonderful training for us and providing this time and space for us just to recognize what is being done in other libraries and building on those conversations that I may visit with Martindale because Martindale's library is as small as mine is. And how are we, and they're also a nonprofit. So how are we able to utilize what our gifts are, what our needs are as a group. And then when we see someone, I'm going to use Melinda as an example. When we see a larger library that has more staff, that is having a successful group, and we have a group on Facebook, and so we'll see the successful activities, and we'll say, oh, Buda has, they've got these great activities going on. We need to try it. And so we have really utilized that cohort, and the us all working as a whole group and cohort has made each one of us better as individual libraries. And we always know we have support if we have questions on how to implement a program or why is ours working when not working when theirs is. And so it's been a beautiful relationship, and having Takesha to be able to help guide us and give us inspiration with different activities is also really important.
Excellent, thank you. Dre, I'd like to pass the baton to you for a few minutes to talk about what you've done with City of Sundown Library. So I know that you had originally heard of Libraries for Health from a presentation at Texas Library Association that
Yes.
Abena and Susan had given, which I think sort of was the inspiration for you thinking through how to bring in some of these resources into Sundown. So can you talk to us a little bit about how you've introduced elements of Libraries for Health into your own library? What's that looked like?
Sure. Since we aren't in the area to get funding from the St. David's, we have had to be resourceful. And somebody actually just mentioned about the Hogg Foundation. They are one of our grant funders that we received. Also, the FMH Foundation supplied us with the American Heart Association, which gave us our Gamer Lounge Health Hub. So this is just an aspect that I wanted our library to be a place of health, like what I had heard them talking about, and going beyond we're just the place for books. And so I mentioned it. We went through a large renovation, so there were multiple funders, and I happened to mention it. The Talker Foundation was one of our funders. So our space that is actually our gamer lounge, which has all of, consoles and stuff like that for after school use, it is the health hub station for during school hours. So we have just a very private space, soundproofed for community members to come in for their telehealth services. We thought that it would be very useful for just teledoc, but it's mostly been used, in fact, exclusively been used for teletherapy. So it is a private space. I have someone that just, happened to say, I don't want everybody knowing my business, and being able to go to the library for an hour has been wonderful. So just thinking outside of the box of what could our space be used for beyond gaming. And it has proved very helpful and useful for our community.
Excellent. One last question for you before we get to our final question for the whole panel. So ladies, start thinking about advice you'd give to the audience. But Dre, I know that you and the other staff member at City of Sundown Library are mental health first aid certified. You've expanded your sort of resource section at the stacks in the library. You just talked about the telehealth component of the gamer lounge. But as we know, funding isn't necessarily consistent. And so sometimes you need to sort of reach out and sort of figure out, how can I make this work piece by piece? What are some lessons learned from you about managing that process of just trying to sort of cobble together some of these components and find the support to make them work?
Yes, so I thought the peer specialist was wonderful, except for we couldn't find that funding anywhere. So we became the peer specialist. The Hogg Foundation, that was part of how I wrote it in, was, hey, we want to be mental health first aid certified. So we became those specialists. I mean, we're not trained near to the level, but we do have resources to be able to direct other people too. And so just continuing to hear what people are doing in our area, having network connections, staying informed and asking questions. Hey, is this something that your foundation would consider? Or are you have a lot of health projects going? Well, how could we partner with that? So just kind of compartmentalizing different funders and gearing ourselves towards, hey, we need this, we need staff, so let's do this here and this there. And we need, we needed like an actual computer. So who's gonna supply that? So thinking outside and beyond just one funder or one organization, it has been beneficial to us.
Thank you. Final lightning round question before we open it up to some comments and questions from the audience. Melinda, Susan, Dre, advice that you would give to another library to bring peer support resources into their small town or rural town library? Melinda.
Well, I know we have a lot of public librarians on here, and so I'm gonna call us all out. We all want to be everything to everybody, but we can't. So you need to be evaluating your capacity before you start these kind of programs. You'll need some physical space, which maybe could be shared with something else that you're already doing, but you also need the mental bandwidth and the emotional bandwidth. Set yourself up for success. Really consider that before you get started. And the other thing actually addresses one of the questions we had, if we had any pushback from any community organizations. Absolutely not. That's the other thing I would say, is reach out to your existing community organizations. Work to bring those services to your patrons, or your patrons to those services. Everyone that we partnered with was just so happy to have another partnership, another avenue to achieve their goals.
Thank you. Susan, advice.
I believe that everything that Melinda said is absolutely valid. And our advice would be to reach out to the community. We have become close partners with many Williamson County health entities that are here helping and focused. We cannot do it all as a part-time staff. We hope that we can, but we're not able to. So we bring in experts in various areas to help us to lead discussions and seminars and activities and groups. And this is a whole community effort. And honestly, the joke in Gerald Library is, don't tell Susan you know how to do anything, because suddenly you'll just be doing it, whether you were just coming in to get a library card or fax something. You're suddenly the neurodivergent friends group leader. And so it is empower others, learn to pivot. Some things that you believe are going to be a wonderful opportunity surprise you. For example, we have a lot of veterans in our community, so we were going to do a partnership with 22-0 Healing Our Heroes and Go Team Therapy Dogs, and no one showed up. And we were like, oh my goodness, what do we do now? And so we decided instantly to do Facebook Live, and there were 83 people watching online. And so learn to pivot, and it will help your group grow and become more successful.
Thanks, Susan. Dre, advice to give.
I just learn from who you can. This is great. I'm looking forward to the toolkit because I haven't seen it yet. And but I love what all of the other libraries are doing, and you just adapt it to where you can. And like Susan said, pivot, but use your spaces creatively, and just don't think that you have to stay within the box. Just keep thinking outside the box.
Excellent. Well, big thanks to our panel of library directors for sharing their insights on bringing resources into their community. We have 1 minute left in the hour. We've answered a few of the questions in the chat, but if anyone has other questions they'd like to come off mute or pitch in the chat, please feel free. We'll try and get to maybe one more. All right, then we will give everyone back the afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning to learn more about Libraries for Health, its evaluation report, its replication toolkit. These slides, the recording, and the materials that we've been dropping in the chat will be sent out to everyone who has been registered, and then maybe even far beyond that. Thank you. We appreciate your time, and as always, feel free to reach out to our team at Texas Rule Funders for any items that we can support. Thanks.